Hi, this is Hilary Burns. My show, The Getting Real with Hilary Show, is dedicated to you. This show is meant to inspire you and to have other guests on who have a story, who might have been stuck, to inspire you that you can also get unstuck and create a life you love. That we can all be free, we don't have to feel alone, and we don't have to feel that there's something wrong with us. That's my message, and I hope you'll join and tune in for some exciting adventures and interviews. Hi, this is Hilary Burns, and this is the Getting Real with Hilary show, where we talk about what can't be said and the AAA formula for freedom, which is awareness, acceptance, and action. And today I am here with Jeff Johnston, the founder of the Living Undeterred Project, which is a nonprofit organization, and Living Undeterred, which is his for-profit company. Jeff is changing Living Undeterred is changing the narrative on mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. And Jeff, he might have more, but what I know is he has a blog, a book, and a podcast, and he just finished a 95-day tour of 40 states, which we're going to let him tell us all about. So welcome, Jeff. It's great to have you today.
Yeah, Hilary, I'm super excited. I love these opportunities to be vulnerable and to share stories. That seems to make people comfortable about telling their own stories when they hear somebody else's first. So hopefully today when we get done, that somebody listening or watching can walk away from this a better person.
So yes, I'm sure they will, based on what little I know about you. It sounds like, you're doing incredible stuff, but can you, before we talk about your 95-day tour, can you just tell us, I'm sure you put it in your book and your blog and your podcast, but just, where you were, how you got into this, and, maybe that will inspire someone who might be facing those challenges themselves.
Yeah, I have a quote that we use at all my presentations and everywhere I speak. It's on the back of all of our shirts. Purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. So you got to say that a few times. Purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. And I will now kind of move into why it's personal for me.
Okay.
My previous life, I was a financial advisor from age 23 till still currently. I'm still licensed and so forth. But my focus was building wealth for clients, building wealth for myself. I did that since I was 23. Got married, had 3 boys. And at age 50, I kind of felt, Hilary, I'd made it. I accumulated a good chunk of money for myself, for my clients, happily married, 3 boys. Not a lot of trauma and chaos in my life. And I was an alcoholic since 8th grade, drank probably 5-6 days a week for 30 years. But I was functional. I could go to work. I have attention deficit, which is one of the best things I was ever given. And I try to teach people not to use the word disorder because, again, I have my thoughts on that. So with attention deficit, I always have an active mind, and sometimes that got me in trouble. It certainly didn't help my grades. But at age 50, I was sitting there on top of the mountain, patting myself on the back. Community thought I was successful, and I was. By all standards of society, I was successful. And then on October 4th, 2016, everything changed. And like it does for every single one of us, eventually something happens. And for me, I got that call that every parent dreads. I became a member of a club that you don't ask to be and you can never leave. But our oldest son, Seth, was found dead in a hotel room, needle in his arm, heroin laced with fentanyl. So that day, time stood still. My life changed, and I'll talk about it. So the day Seth died was the end of a 6-year journey. He was 23 in his journey of addiction, alcohol use, mental health. Came to an end at age 23, but it started at 16 when he was prescribed Adderall. Now, I'm not indicting the medical profession, but where I fumbled the ball as a parent was I didn't understand what Adderall was. You see, I had attention deficit, still do, and I was never given any drugs or any meds for it. My dad just told me it was a superpower, and go outside and chase your brother around the wood, and fight each other, and get that energy all kind of burned off. But today we tell kids that it's a disease or a disorder, and we give them a pill because basically we don't want to take the time to talk to kids and understand them. So it's easier for us to just diagnose. And so Seth was given Adderall, and the journey started, and he got into marijuana, alcohol, like a lot of kids, drunk driving, breaking and entering, cocaine, prison, got out of prison, heroin, fentanyl, death from 16 to 23. So that really was a slap in the face for me about humility and about gratitude. And death entered my life as an opportunity to be a better person, not a bitter person, which is a template of the living undeterred mindset. Better, not bitter. And so Hilary, boys came home from school that day, and I sat him down on the couch. My wife's off to my right. We're obviously very distraught. And I figured out I had to say something impactful to the boys. Ian was 15, Roman was 13. And sibling bereavement is the number one cause of depression, anxiety, and stress for kids. It isn't losing a parent. It isn't putting their cat down. It's losing a brother or sister. In this case, the older brother, the one they looked up to. And I sat the boys down and I said, boys, and this became a chapter in my book called The Two Roads. And it really is a metaphor to choices we make. Choices precede consequences. And I said, boys, we have one of two roads to go down. We have one road of anger, despair, and hatred, and we'll become alcoholics and addicts ourselves. Or we have a road of inspiration and motivation. And this can be the single greatest moment in our lives and those around us to make a difference. I'm on the second road. I ask you to join me. And that's exactly how I said it. I didn't rehearse it. It just came off very authentic. And the key part of that whole thing, Hilary, was I was asking them to join me. I wasn't going to tell them how to grieve. And for the next 14 months after my big motivational speech, my wife and I drank every single day. I didn't go to work. I told my staff and my employees that I needed a year off, to get my life together. I knew my wife at that time was really struggling. And for 14 months, her and I just drank and drank and drank. And then on December 24th, 2017, I had that epiphany moment that a lot of people do, Hilary. I just looked in the mirror and realized it's time. It's time to grow up. It's time to be a man. It's time to stop. I quit drinking that day and I've never looked back. I've never thought about it. I don't call myself sober because that implies I'm in a fight. I just don't drink. To me, it's just that simple. But it wasn't that simple for my wife. And on June 29th of 2021, I buried my wife for alcohol abuse. We were married 21 years. And again, death entered my life as an opportunity to be a better human, not a bitter one. And so I stand today and I am as authentic as I can be, but I'm at the best place I've ever been in my life right now. Emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially. I really at a point, I work really freaking hard every single day. And I can share some of the tools I've used, some of the philosophy I live by, and that's my story. There's more to it. Obviously, in between all this, I wrote a book. I do a podcast called Living Undeterred. And then recently we just wrapped up our tour, but I want to change lives. I'm only 56. I got a lot of years ahead of me. And I want to do this till my last breath. And, it took me a long time to find my meaning and purpose in my life, but death presented it to me as an opportunity. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing, and I'm sorry for your losses.
Yeah, there's a lot of us out there in pain, a lot of us that have lost people, and I know you have, and if you haven't yet, you will. I mean, we all do. We all have a story. And that's what I've learned about this journey is this isn't a me narrative. This is a we narrative. This is all about us. And so my podcast, my conversations, I was at a suicide walk today. I'm supporting the community on suicide. Well, my two deaths in my family were alcohol and drugs, but the overhanging concern is mental health. They're all related. So as advocates, we need to support each other, whether your son or daughter or parents died from one thing. Pain is still pain. Loss is still loss. We need to be there for each other as humans.
Well, as my AAA formula, obviously awareness,
Mm-hmm.
acceptance, and action sounds exactly what you're doing. I believe that when we start talking about things, we can get free because it gets us aware.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow, I'm sure you've done a lot. I would love to hear about your 95-day tour if that's something you want to talk about. I know you just finished it,
Yeah.
40 states, um, in 95 days. And, what were
Mm-hmm.
you doing and how do you think you helped people?
Great question. I look back in hindsight now and think how wild that ride was. I was on my elliptical about 10 months ago working out. I jumped off, I jumped on Twitter, and I saw the story of this dad who was riding his bike across the state of Iowa to raise money for breast cancer. Obviously, this guy probably didn't care about breast cancer until his wife got it.
Right.
So that's that purpose becomes passion when it gets personal saying that we use on all of our materials. And so I thought, well, I can do that. I have imposter syndrome. I'm a competitor. I don't like when someone does something better than me. So instead of me complaining about that person, I just make myself better.
Mhm.
It doesn't do any good for me to even focus at all what they're doing. It's just how can I improve my game? So I already had my book. I had my podcast. I was on podcast. I was active on social media. I just felt like I wasn't doing enough. And again, as someone with attention deficit, I'll never feel like I'm ever doing enough. And so I saw this dad and I thought, well, I can do that, but I was too small and I don't want to ride a bike.
Mhm.
So I stayed up till 3 a.m. and I came up with this wild idea that I would go buy an RV. Now I've never been in an RV in my entire lifetime, but I didn't want to. How else am I going to get around the United States? I don't want to go in a car. And plus, my two boys, I thought, their mom died, and I thought, what a great chance for us to be bonding as a family. And how many people always say, well, I want to get an RV and drive around the country. We know no one ever does it. Well, now I could do that actually, but actually help people too.
Mhm.
And so I stayed up till 3 a.m, came up with this business plan called the Living Undeterred U.S. Tour. Um, Took about 10 books with me, drove up to Camping World, about an hour away, walked in, asked for the sales manager, and left with a 34-foot brand new 2022 Hurricane Thor RV, and went on social media that night and started telling everybody what I was going to do. And there's a reason why I did it that way, because if I wouldn't have bought the RV, I may have talked myself out of it.
Right. And then
And
how did you know where to stop? I mean, how
I
did you
didn't. I
get?
just thought I'd have to start reaching out to my LinkedIn friends and start asking and start cold calling and start working hard. Like I built my investment company up. That's how I started doing my investment career back when I was 23. We didn't have computers and there wasn't the internet. We had computers, but it was very archaic. And I had a typewriter from college with whiteout. I mean, kids today have it made, and I knocked on doors to sell life insurance for 5 years, and that's, so I built a lot of resiliency up like that. And so I figured, well, I'm going to go on this tour. I'm going to change lives. It wasn't glorified. I mean, we had lots of issues. I drove 12 hours to one place and we had 6 people show up. And then the next event had 100. So
Mm.
what I tried to find, Hilary, were nonprofits that I could partner with. And the ultimate goal was that I would raise money, and then after expenses, I would split the profits. Well, the problem was I lost my butt. I mean, I wanted to raise $1 million. I raised like 30,000. I had no corporate sponsorships, very little donations, but I kept going undeterred. I mean, there was nights I sat in the RV at a KOA in South Dakota in tears because I'm just throwing in more money. No money's coming in. But I thought, this is a real test of Undeterred. This is what living Undeterred is all about. I can't quit. I've committed to this project. And then so we did it. We did it. It was hard. I had a lot of people. My cousin drove the RV for most of the trip. He's in recovery, so his story is heroic. But what I found out, Hilary, is everybody out there has a story. And some of my most impactful moments were strangers I met walking their dog or people at gas stations. And then I would talk to them and found out that they were in the army and their dad committed suicide. And I just realized that having intimate human conversations is really one way we're going to get out of this absolute disaster we've created as humans.
Mm.
We created this mess with mental health, and we certainly have to fix it ourselves. But it was the most humbling thing I've ever encountered. And every single presentation in every state felt like I was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Mm.
The same sorrow, the same pain, the same hurt, the same hopelessness is everywhere, permeates all elements of society. There's no discrimination when it comes to addiction, substance use disorders, and mental health. And so I came back a better person, a little less money in my wallet, but a better person. And I will raise the million. It just wasn't going to be the 95 days I thought it was going to be. It'll take me more time, but I'm going to do that and more. And I've got more projects in line. I've got quite a few pretty big projects that I'm working on right now that just, again, with attention deficit, I really can't stop. I'm addicted to my story right now. I'm addicted to helping people.
Mm. So who would you say was your most, just tell us like one story about how you impacted someone on that tour. Who can you think of someone?
Well, I'll tell you a story how someone impacted me.
Okay.
I was in Salt Lake City, Utah, at a presentation. What was the name of the group? I had so many groups I worked with. It was a guy that was in the service in Iraq and stuff. And he formed this nonprofit. And so I was asked to come in with, I don't know, it was 50, 60 people. That really good presentation. And then we were done. I met this gentleman afterwards, and he told me, he said, Jeff, and hopefully this doesn't trigger anybody. So I'll have a trigger warning, or actually this is your show. So I'll make sure that I don't say something that hurts people.
Okay.
But this gentleman said, I 5 years ago, I was going to get, divorced, and my wife was, she had a lot of mental health issues. She was a substance abuser, and I couldn't be in the marriage anymore. So I told her we were going to get separated. That was the advice that everyone told me to do, and when marriages don't work, you get divorced, right? That's what you're supposed to do. And he said, so I filed separation, got an apartment and everything. And I came back a little while later to pick up my two daughters, because it was my turn to see them. And my wife had shot them both and shot herself. Right. Exactly. And I just stood there, and I gave Michael a hug, and we started crying together. And I said, these are the moments that I know I'm going to run into when I'm telling this story. Because if I don't tell my story publicly, he probably doesn't tell me his story. He's remarried, fights everything every day, but he's remarried. He's moved on. He became the best that he can based on the cards he was dealt. But I can't even fathom that. I mean, even what I've went through, I meet people that have been through. I know it's easy to compare grief. Then it's not something we need to do in this mental health world we live in, is compare grief. But man, that was just something that hit me hard. That was one story. And I'd say I had hundreds of stories. That was the most impactful one that I ran into.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just, again, it's a mental health issue. And what he told me was that I can't play the what if game, based on the knowledge I have now. Obviously, I would have stayed in the marriage, or I would have done something different. But I think one thing I try to teach people that follow us is we can't really identify too much with the past. And I learned this through meditation, is not to identify with my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Be aware of them, respect them, but don't identify with them. So when the feeling of grief and pain and sorrow comes into my life, I don't fight it. It's like a mental health workout for me. I know it's coming, and I lean into it. And I've never felt worse ever after a good cry. I always feel better. I know that in advance. So when I start to cry, I just let it go.
I wrote one of my blogs on crying is the new orgasm.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it that way, but it makes sense.
Because
it is. It was
it
so
is.
just, I felt when I was done, it was like literally working out. I felt really good.
Yeah. I know. And I agree. I've resisted my emotion. That's what my second book's about. How I resisted my emotions. I thought they were wrong. But it's hard when you've resisted them for so many years, but when you can, as you say, lean into it, it really is freeing.
Yeah. And really, it's liberating.
Yeah.
And I didn't meditate until Seth died. And then after I quit drinking, so I started meditating about 5 years ago, and I do like 10 minutes a day. And it's mindfulness meditation, simple. It's guided. So I have a voice talk me through it. And there's times that I meditated and, nothing happened. There's times I'm captured in thought and I can't be aware of them because I'm thinking too much. I don't fight it. And then there's times I have experiences that are psychedelic, they just are amazing. One time I was meditating outside on a rock. We were scuba diving, my son and I, down in Grand Turk, and a storm came in and there were people watching me meditate. It wasn't a big storm. It was just a rain. And apparently I was so into my 20-minute meditation that it rained and the temperature dropped like 15 degrees. And I never came out of my trance. And it's only happened like few times. But when that does happen, it's such a spiritual thing that, it gives me hope that there's something bigger out there that is, that I don't know, it just gave me a really good feeling,
Yeah. So what is it? I mean, I know you're doing great stuff. What is it that you hope to do? Like, what would be, in 5 years, if you had accomplished what would you?
Let me
I know
answer
you'll
that.
never be done, but like, what
No,
would
that's a great
be
question, Hilary.
something?
Yeah, and I get this all the time from the media and from people who interview me. And, I appreciate the question. In my mind, in a way, I almost kind of look at it as like, for some people, I call it a trap question. Especially people that have an agenda, and you don't, but a lot of people ask me that to kind of argue with me. And so
No,
here's
I'm
my
looking at like what's in your,
right.
when you are connected to the spiritual, what is it
Well, here's
that
my answer.
you're
And
bringing
and
here?
again, this is how I got to thinking about that, because really, obviously, my goal, Hilary, would be to save every human from misery and addiction.
Right.
But see, that's not going to happen. It's very unlikely that would ever happen. So here's my answer. If what we were doing was working, I wouldn't be doing this. That's my answer to the question, what's the end game? What question are you trying to answer, Jeff? I go back to basically a statement instead of answering the question directly. And now I make a statement. If what we were doing was working, I wouldn't be doing this. And that's the bottom line. 800 Americans a day, 800 Americans a day die from overdose, suicide, and alcohol. 800 a day.
Wow.
Think about that. Now, when my son died of fentanyl, which I'd never even heard of fentanyl, I heard of heroin, obviously, and I've never done drugs, so I didn't know what fentanyl was. 46,000 Americans died in 2016. Do you know how many died last year from fentanyl? And by the way, fentanyl is the #1 killer of Americans between 18 and 44 today, or overdoses, but specifically it's fentanyl. Do you know how many died last year nationwide?
No.
110,000.
Wow. No,
So
I
this is
know.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have.
So it went from 46,000 to 110,000.
Wow.
And I will tell you, prescription opioids have been cut in half. Right, exactly. And
What do you
that's the
mean?
prescription opioids that doctors were prescribing,
Yeah.
Purdue Pharma and all that. They've been cut in over 50%, have been taken off the streets. So you're asking, well, how did deaths go up 100%, right? And this is one of the reasons why cause and effect don't always happen. Many times there's an inverse relationship between what happens and what really happens. And this is why a lot of people are very naive on the drug wars. Oh, shut the borders down or arrest the criminals. It's like, if I'm an addict and I'm taking Oxycontin because I'm in pain and I fear withdrawals because now I'm addicted to it. Now my body, not only do I need the
You're
pill
going
to
to get
help
it
my
off the
pain,
street.
there you go. And I'm getting it at illicit fentanyl on the street is what's killing. It's not legitimate fentanyl killing people. It's synthetically made by drug cartels and put into drugs. So, this is where I talk to people. Sometimes they'll say, well, we just got to arrest the drug lords. We just got to put borders up.
No.
It's like, you know what? You live in a cave. You don't understand addiction.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've talked to, unfortunately, I know other people who've lost children, and I've interviewed a couple.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, why are they, I mean, if they're in business, why are they killing their customers? I guess it's because they don't know how to use fentanyl in their.
No, that's not. I appreciate
Okay.
the observation, but let me
Yes,
educate you on
so
this. There's two reasons. One, there will always be customers. It's that's why Walt Disney will never run out of babies and kids. Disney World will always have kids. There'll always be addiction. There'll always be substance use. There'll always be pain and suffering. Always. They know that. They don't care. And they actually are putting it in because fentanyl is 100 times more addictive than heroin. So they're doing it to addict kids. Kids die. They don't care. They simply don't care. Adults die. They don't care. There's always going to be people behind them buying drugs. And that's why, as a society, we can focus on the supply side, or we could focus on the demand side. And I am a demand side advocate. Now, I think we need supply side. We need better, we need everything. We need to, in a perfect world, it would be great to take every drug off the market, but everybody out there that's addicted right now, they're going to go do something else. They're going to find something else. Okay.
Right.
So if we can understand why people make the decisions they do in the first place, and we starting with what's called prehab versus rehab. So we're going to the kids. Prehabilitation. You know what? We need to intervene before the intervention. And so my life's mission is to develop programs to help adolescents make better choices under difficult situations and to empower them so they know the difference between an autonomous behavior and a dependent behavior. There's an illusion of autonomy. Most people, what do most alcoholics say? I got it under control. I'm okay. I got it under control. I don't drive drunk when I drink. I just do it at home. And these are things that we say to each other that's the illusion of an autonomous behavior, which is really a dependent behavior. And as a society, we need to spend a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of patience with kids today. We want to change the narrative. It ain't going to come by getting a 40-year-old housewife to quit drinking 2 bottles of Pinot Grigio. That's not changing the narrative. That may save her life. Changing the narrative is getting a next generation of kids coming up to not go down these roads in the first place. And I don't give a crap what drugs are on the market. Fentanyl could be free and heroin could be free. I would never do it. So the supplies are relevant for me and my 2 boys.
So thank you, Jeff, for being here today. I look forward to our second episode. If you want to find Jeff, he's at livingundeterred.com. You can buy his book, hear more about his story, go to his podcast. And thank you, Jeff, for being here today. And I'll look forward to talking more very soon.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.